Hi everyone, welcome to the final session, week 9 of the Fintech Summer Sessions. Maha, can you hear me okay?
Yes, Sagar, you're loud and clear.
Okay, excellent. Very nice to see you all again. I hope everyone had a good Eid break. Firstly, apologies. We were meant to have a session last week on blockchain, DeFi, and crypto, but unfortunately, the presenter of that had an emergency, could not make that. We will look to rearrange that session at some point in the future, but this will be the last session of the Fintech Summer Sessions. What that means is we now have a 9-week course, not a 10-week course. So if you are looking to get a certificate, that means that you need to have attended 7 out of the 9 sessions that we've had. So today's session is really important. It's super important. It brings together a lot of the stuff we've discussed over the last 9 weeks, or last 8 weeks together. And it's really about how you can use that information to then be looking at entrepreneurship in financial services. So over the last 8 weeks, I hope you've been able to attend at least some of these sessions, but over the last 8 weeks, you've gained a lot of knowledge, right? You are now probably in the top 2% of the population in Saudi in understanding how financial services work. And what you choose to do with that information is really up to you. You can either use it for your general knowledge, which is perfectly fine. You can consider a career in financial services, or you could consider entrepreneurship in financial services. And that's what we're going to be focusing on this session today. As ever, please add your questions in the Q&A and we'll go through as many of those as we can at the end. And we're really going to just go through this presentation. There's going to be a lot of information, but this session is being recorded. And this session will be shared with yourselves afterwards as well. And the slides will be shared with yourselves as well. Any questions, you can always contact us. I'm available on LinkedIn. You've also got info@fintechsaudi.com for any questions you have which are not getting answered today. So let's crack on. So what does it mean to be an entrepreneur? Let's talk about the entrepreneur mindset. And it's really super simple, right? It's being an entrepreneur is being able to look for opportunities and look for doing things better in a better way. The first step is there must be a better way. That's the first step of a mindset of the entrepreneur. The second step is around, I am going to build a better way for doing things. I am going to build a better way. And then the final step is really to execute. It's about it's about actually going out and building a better way for you to be able to do things. So execution is a key part of that. Execution is a key part of being an entrepreneur. And that actually differentiates yourselves from the 90% of people which have a great idea, but don't execute. Execution is very, very much key to being an entrepreneur. And at the heart of all of this is innovation, right? So an entrepreneur is about improving things. It's about innovating. It's about making things better. And that's really the mindset which we're discussing here today and which we're going to go through in terms of building the framework. Now, historically, entrepreneurship was quite difficult in financial services. Historically, your only option in financial services was to be employed by a large organization. Historically, you had to have a huge amount of capital to start a business in financial services. You needed to have loads of regulation. You needed to have loads of influence, loads of work. It was a hard work getting a regulatory license. And that's why for the majority of people, the only option available to them was actually to become an employee of a large organization. Technology, as we have seen over the last 8 weeks, has changed that. Technology has disrupted things to make it easier for you to start a business in financial services. Now we can have teams starting in a garage, as we said, which can now compete with the largest organizations in the world. And that's because technology has reduced the barriers to entry to enable that to happen. Now, looking at the power of entrepreneurship, I really like the PayPal case study. So if you haven't looked at PayPal, this is definitely something to consider. So PayPal was one of the first fintech companies, or true fintech companies, to be developed. And the founders of PayPal are called the PayPal Mafia. And the reason for that is after developing PayPal, they actually went on and developed some wonderful things. So you had Elon Musk, for example, which has developed Tesla and SpaceX. You've had Reid Hoffman, who's developed LinkedIn. You've got a whole group which developed YouTube. And this shows the power of entrepreneurship, that by building a successful business in an industry, the founders can then go on and build other things, can go become investors, can become entrepreneurs in other things, but really about creating new jobs, creating new value. And that is very much the power of entrepreneurship. But we should remember that being an entrepreneur is not for everyone. It's not an easy task at all. I've had the experience of being an entrepreneur several times over. I'm still involved in a few projects as well, and a few startups as an advisor or a co-founder. And it is not an easy task being an entrepreneur, right? There's long hours with limited recognition. You are not in an organization where you will be rewarded, you will be promoted, you will be given a raise. It is down to you to get the work done. And that will mean that you will put in extra time in there, and there will be nobody really there to pat you on the back to say you've done a great job. You also need to be comfortable with multitasking and wearing lots of hats. When you're starting off as an entrepreneur, you could be doing everything, including the accounting, marketing strategy. You could be looking at business development. You look at the website. You could be looking at how you get into different companies. You could be looking at all sorts of things. And you've got to be comfortable in wearing these different hats and taking responsibility in different areas, even if you're not familiar with that area, bringing yourself up to speed pretty quickly in building different things. The other thing about being an entrepreneur is the unclear direction. That can be quite scary for a lot of people, that you don't really know where you are going when you're an entrepreneur with a lot of things. Sometimes you may be the only person or first person doing this, so you've got the first mover advantage, but then you're trying to sort of find your way into what is the best way of doing things. But in any case, when you're building a business, there's lots of different things which can happen, and there's no structured linear direction for building a business. It's very much about being able to think on your feet, make the right decisions under the circumstances, and just keep staying resilient and pushing on in that unclear direction. The other thing to think about is the stress and the impact on your mental health. That's really important, and I think that's underrepresented for people who look at becoming entrepreneurs. There is a huge amount of pressure on you. You may not be, you may have bills to pay. You may be looking at how you can become financially sustainable with paying your bills, but at the same time trying to build a business and then dealing with all the different things as well. And that can have a huge impact on your mental health and stress. So that's something else to think about when being an entrepreneur. And finally, and most importantly, it's about the ability to embrace failure. And that's difficult. Because we've always been taught that you need to succeed at everything. You need to get the A's, you need to be successful in school, in university, in your work, in your career. Embracing failure can be a difficult concept when that's where we've been engineered to think about. And embracing failure is important because very few entrepreneurs get the first idea right. Very few go into a business and are very successful on the first turn. If you look at the most successful entrepreneurs, and you can Google them, you will see that they had a lot of different failures before they went to the successful one. And if you're of the mindset that after your failure, you don't want to be an entrepreneur anymore, then entrepreneurship might not be right for you, because you're going to have to get through a few of those failures to then figure out which is going to be a success afterwards. So that's the hard part about being an entrepreneur, but entrepreneurship can also be very rewarding. So you can be making a difference. That's one of the key reasons people become entrepreneurs. They want to make a difference, they want to change the world, and they want to create something that nobody else has really created. And part of it is also around control over your own destiny. You are in control of how successful you are, because you're in complete control over your work. You're not having to report to anybody. You're not having to be looking for that next promotion. You are in control over how successful you'll be. And that's really important as well as being an entrepreneur. Another reason why it's very rewarding is a flexible lifestyle. It allows you to plan your life the way you want to plan your life, and plan your business the way that it makes sense. You don't need to sit in an office from a 9-to-5 perspective. You can be working on in the evenings, and you could be relaxing during the day if you want to. You just set your business up in the right way to do that. So the flexible lifestyle is another reason why people choose to be an entrepreneur. And another big part of this is following your passion. We are all passionate about different things, but how many of us are able to actually follow our passions in the work environment? You're structured, you've been told what to do, you need to be looking at different things which you may not be passionate about. But as an entrepreneur, you can take that and you can focus on your passion. You can make sure what you're working on is you're passionate about it and you love doing as well. And finally, you can also look at leaving a legacy. That's really important. You want to put your stamp on the world. You want to be known for something. Well, leaving a legacy entrepreneurship is a great way of you being able to leave your legacy and leave your mark on the world. Notice one thing, that I haven't mentioned money in any of these areas. And whilst some entrepreneurs are very successful, they may exit their company and make a lot of money. Money should not be the main motivator to go into entrepreneurship. And the reason for that is because, as we discussed, a lot of the projects will fail. A lot of the projects will require time and investment, which you may not make a return on. So I would not advise anybody to go and become an entrepreneur solely if you want to make, if your objective is to make the most amount of money. That might be a good byproduct from you being able to be passionate, focused, resilient, and growing your business, but it should not be the main motivator to start a business. Right, so let's crack on to the main part of this presentation, which is the entrepreneurship framework. So today, we are going to give you a framework if you are considering being an entrepreneur of how you can develop your solution. And this framework covers a few areas, and we'll go into each one in a bit of detail. So the first point is starting with a pain point. Never start with a solution, because we don't know who will want that solution. Always start with a pain point. Look for something which needs to be solved. The second part is then developing an idea which resolves that pain point. And then after that, you validate your idea. You look at, does that idea make sense? Are there customers out there for that idea? And then after you validated your idea, you've got two options. One is you decide that your idea cannot be validated, and then you go back to developing a pain point and go through that process again, or you go ahead and build your fintech business. The first three steps, we'll go into each of these in a bit more detail, but the first three steps require very little capital for you to develop. And that's really important, that we hear from entrepreneurs who say, I need $100,000, I need $50,000 to start my business. You don't. You need to be able to dedicate time and effort and follow a structured reasoning. But the first three steps of this and getting to validating your idea needs very little capital. Building a fintech business, you need capital at that point. But if you've done the first three steps well, then you are in a good comfort zone that you know that your business has got some merit to it and is likely to be beneficial and likely to grow. So let's go into each of these in a bit more detail. So let's start with the pain points. What do we mean by looking at the pain points? Well, the pain points are very much out there. They're a part of your daily life. If you take your journey, for example, going shopping, you can think about all the pain points you meet in the way. The fact that you have to go out and you have to go to a physical store, the fact that you have to go and find the right products, the fact you have to go and stand at a till, the fact you then have to pay the cashier the right amount of money, you've got to collect the receipt. The fact that when you want to return something, you then have to go to a different area and speak to another customer service and return your receipts. So these are all pain points which we have in our daily lives. And it's really important that when you're starting with a pain point, think about a personal experience. The most successful fintech entrepreneurs have always started with a personal pain point that they faced, and they then developed a business on the back of that as well. So just going into a little bit more detail about this, if you're able to click on in financial services, if you're able to click for a taxi in a few buttons, if you're able to shop for goods, for groceries in a few buttons, then why should you have to stand in the queue to go and do your financial services, go to your banking? And that's really important, that there are a lot of pain points in financial services for you to focus on. We've got just highlighting some of the ones which you could look at, but there's tons of others. But there are questions you can ask yourself. Why is it faster to drive money to some countries than it is to make an international digital transfer payment to those countries? Why do you need to go into a bank branch to sign a document when majority of documents can be signed online? Why is it so difficult to buy stocks? Why is lending so difficult and expensive for SMEs? Why do you have to wait up to an hour to get a very simple question answered by customer service? These are all pain points that you could look at focusing on in financial services. And there are tons of other ones as well. If you start thinking about your financial services journey, whether you're going shopping, whether you're doing banking, whether you're buying a car, whatever it is, you will start identifying things that you say, hey, these things we could be able to make better. And that's the first step, is to find that pain point. The other point about a pain point is make sure you are passionate about the area. You are likely, if you go ahead with this journey, to be dedicating 100 hours a week, spending all your time thinking about this sort of area. It should be an area you're passionate about. If you're not passionate about the area, then it's going to be really difficult to develop something in that, because your motivation won't be there all the time to be thinking about that area and enjoy thinking about that area as well. So make sure you're passionate about the area that you want to solve. So we've talked about the pain point and how you think about coming up with a pain point. The next step is developing an idea to solve that pain point. And we really like using the business canvas model. So you might have used this in university, or you might have used this in other settings. But the business canvas model is a really good framework for you to frame your idea. It's into these different areas. And if you just Google business canvas model, business model canvas, you'll be able to find a framework to use. But it covers all the different areas. It looks at the value proposition. What are you actually selling? What are you actually providing? Who are your key partners you're providing this with? What activities and resources do you need? And then on the other side, it's talking about what's your customer relationship? What are the channels? How do you get to the customers? Who are you focusing on? Which customers are you focusing on? And the bottom, it's very much about looking at your costs and looking at your revenue. So this, in effect, is your business, is developing your full business model in one sheet, which is why I really like it. It's a really good framework for you to model yourself. And you may go through several iterations of this. You may even take some post-it notes and move things around and change this around. And that's good, because that means that you're thinking about how your business model can be improved by looking at your business in a holistic way. Just to give you an example of this is Revolut, and this is a business canvas model if Revolut was starting. So Revolut is a very successful fintech business based out of the UK, which is now a digital bank. But when they started, they were very much in the market for helping customers to spend money abroad without incurring high fees. So that was very much their value proposition of how they started. What the key partners for their business were really the banks, the card providers, and the startup community. And what they developed, what their activity was to develop an app linked to a debit card, which did not charge you any commissions, any Forex fees for a certain number of transactions. And that's really how the business model started. The customer segment was really important. And this is really important as well from an entrepreneur, is to be as focused as possible on your customer segment. If you go out and say, I want this solution to go to everyone, that's great. But you don't have a focus then in terms of how do you reach that. If your target audience is women between the ages of 20 to 30 living in a certain district in Riyadh, then it's a lot easier to find out how you can target that customer audience. So having a specific niche to start with is super important. Revolut's, in this case, was the London tech and startup employees, which were traveling abroad frequently. So they knew how to get to those companies, they knew how to target those employees, and that's really how they started. And then they created a referral scheme, which then meant that other customers would be referred from those employees as well. So this is just an overview of the business model for Revolut. Now, in financial services, there's a few things specifically you need to consider when you're developing your business model. The first one is around the regulation. We had that session on regulation and RegTech. We now understand the importance of regulation, why regulation is so important in financial services, because you're dealing with people's money. So it's really important to understand what the regulations are related to the idea you're developing. How are the regulations developed? Now, we will come on to an example later to explain why the regulations should not stop you from developing your solution. But for now, just bear in mind that the regulation is really important to think about. Fintech Saudi has got a fintech regulatory assessment tool, which you're welcome to use. It's for free on our website. So if you're developing anything in financial services, you're able to use the tool, click on what activities you want to work on, and it will tell you whether or not the activity is regulated, who the activity is regulated by, and what are your options if the activity is regulated. So that's a really good tool to use for anybody thinking about developing a fintech solution in Saudi. The second thing to think about is risk management. So this is sort of related to regulation, but it's also about how do you manage your risks internally? What do you think about when you're dealing with other people's money? And this is something which the regulators will look at, but as good corporate governance and good companies within the financial services, you need to think about your risk management as well, of how you manage data, how you look after your customers, how you make sure your customers are kept safe, how do you make sure that your solution is giving the right, communicating the right messages to the customer. This is all related to making sure that you're considering the risks. And the third thing to think about in financial services is industry collaboration. Financial services is very much about collaboration between incumbents, between fintechs, working together to solve problems. And therefore, it's important to think about in your partner's bit of your business model, who could you be looking to collaborate with in financial services. Right, so we've talked about the pain point, and we've talked about how you can then develop an idea and develop a business model with looking at the pain point. Now it's about validating the idea. And this is a step that a lot of people sometimes miss or don't do correctly, which is why we see a lot of people who will come up with an idea pain point, they might develop an idea, and then they go straight to building a business when they don't actually know if the customers want the idea or not. And one thing I really like, and I'd encourage anybody who's looking at this to read this, is a book called The Mum's Test by Rob Fitzpatrick. Now, this is a great way of validating your solution. The whole point of the Mum's Test is if you go to your mum or any member of your family with, hey, I've got this great business idea, they are always going to say, I love it. They're always going to say it's a great idea because they don't want to hurt your feelings. They want you to feel proud of what you're doing. And that's really the case of the Mum's Test. So instead of actually going to a customer and saying, hey, this is a great idea, wouldn't you like to use it? It's much better and more intuitive for you to actually go and ask that customer about the pain points which they're trying to solve, about the pain points you're trying to solve. So you may, for example, the example here is around an app for cookbooks. So the son has got a great idea. I want to develop an app for cooking lessons. And the mom says, oh, I'm great, I'm proud of you. But actually, she's got a lot of cookbooks already. So what the son should really be asking the mum, instead of telling her his idea, is to say, well, how do you currently look at recipes? How do you currently navigate different recipes? How do you do that whilst you're cooking? Are there any challenges you're facing to doing that? How could that be solved? And what that will give you is much more informed data around not only validating your solution, but how to make your solution better as well, because you will understand your customers better, and therefore you'll be able to think about the solution a lot better. So when validating a solution, it's super important to not talk about your solution, but instead understand their current process to understand if your solution would add value to them. And then the next part of that is, even if it does add value, you've got to think about, will your customer actually pay for that solution? And if so, how much? So if you're able to validate that solution, if you're able to understand that customer journey, understand their pain points, and then think about how your solution matches those pain points, then it's also the next step would be to say, is this something you would pay for? Is it, if you would be willing to pay for it, how much would you be willing to pay for it? And that will help you inform your pricing strategy as well for your business. So we've talked about validating an idea. And if you've got to this step, congratulations, because I can tell you 90% of fintech solutions do not get past validating an idea. I myself have gone through several different pain points. I've probably developed hundreds of business model ideas. I've validated them, and very, very few, I would say, then go to the stage of building a fintech business. So if you've done these steps and you've got to the stage of building a fintech business, then you can say that you've actually got something relatively robust. And now it's really a question of going out and executing. And this is when you need to start spending some money, but you don't need to spend a huge amount of money. And that's really important, that you're not going out to build the best thing in the world. You're going out to build the basic low investment prototype, which will allow you to go out and get feedback from customers, which will then allow you to build a better version and going through that process over and over again. And this is really called the lean startup methodology. The lean startup is not about, is about going out with something really basic, which gets you enough to the customers, gets you enough feedback, and then being able to build something on top of that. And that's really cool because it means that you don't need to start with a huge amount of investment. If you're looking at an app, you need a basic amount of setting up your or website. You just need a basic amount of hosting, domain name, and you can set up a website really cheaply using WordPress or Weebly or any of these sort of functionalities. And that should be enough for you to sort of get out and go out and start speaking to customers. And as you gain that momentum, you can then get the confidence of going and investing into something which is more developed, or you can actually go out and build go out and raise some money, knowing that you've already done some customer due diligence already. And part of the funding, part of the process is actually looking for funding as well. So the funding rounds are dependent on what stage you are in your development. Typically starts from a pre-seed round. So pre-seed is really early stage of money. It's also called the friends, family, and fools round. It's about people putting in the first few a few $1,000s, it could be 5,000, it could be 10,000, it could be $20,000 checks to help you get developing your first prototype. It's really high risk because they're coming in, there's nothing which has been developed, they're really working off the idea which you're looking at. But as you develop your solution and move from pre-seed, you then go to the seed stage, which might involve some funds, but it more likely will involve angel investors. So these could be experienced individuals which are experienced in supporting startups, paying, giving them some investment, mentoring them for that growth. And then from the seed stage, you'll then move towards Series A, B, C, and above. And that's really more about growth. So pre-seed and seed is about getting your prototype developed, it's getting your solution up and running. And then Series A is more about growth. So when you hear about companies raising Series A money, it's more a case that they've now developed their solution, they know their solution works, and now they're getting investment to be able to go to market as quickly as possible and to scale their business as quickly as possible. Another thing about raising money is you typically will be raising several rounds throughout your lifetime. And each round you're giving away roughly around 20 to 30% of your business. So what you want your business to be able to grow significantly and look at doubling even every year, 1.5 years, so that you can maintain the valuation. So even though you're giving 20 to 30% of the business in each funding round, overall the size of the business is increasing over time. And it's really important about having enough money for developing the solution, but also giving yourself a runway as well towards the next one, covering your costs of living and things like that. So that's really just a high level about the funding. If you're interested in more about learning more about funding, do look at our FinTech Access Guide. I'll give you the link at the end. And we've got a section there about investment, about different stages of investment and where to look at getting investment. But as I mentioned, to start with, you shouldn't need a lot of investment unless you're doing something super technical around blockchain or AI, which requires some really technical expertise. You should be able to start with a small amount of seed capital to see that your solution is actually working before you then go out and raise more money. The other thing to think about when you're starting a business is talent, right? So you are a single founder businesses are tough. I've tried it in the past. I find it extremely difficult. And I've always looked to find a co-founder for any of the businesses I develop. And it's important to look at co-founders which complement your skills. So if you're really good at technology, if you're really good at technical stuff, you might want to find a co-founder which is more better at the business stuff, which is better at operations. In terms of finding co-founders, we get asked that a lot. You can go out to meetup events, you can go out to networking, you can meet people through the FinTech Summer Sessions. There are different ways in looking at it, but I found personally the best way of finding a co-founder is finding your best friends from school, from university, and the most hardworking friends from school and university, because those are the ones which you've already, in a way, you've been able to screen. You've seen that they have the strong work ethic, and they're the ones which I've been most successful with in the past. So that's one thing about bringing a co-founder. Build teams based on your core activities. That's important. So if your business is related to content development, growth, around building content, your team should reflect that. If your business is much more technical and looking at data, then you should be looking at hiring data scientists. Building a culture from the start is really important. What sort of culture do you want to set? Because that's the culture which will go on and how the individuals will work together. We in Fintech Saudi, we look for a very collaborative culture. We've always developed a very collaborative, passionate culture, which is always trying to get things done. And that's something which we tell all the new joiners which join Fintech Saudi, is they need to be part of that culture as we go forward. The other thing about talent is do look at government programs which are there to support the growth of talent and support yourself. So Fintech Saudi, we have the internship program, which we've mentioned a few times as a way for fintechs to hire talent. And there are other programs as well. We have a job portal, we have our fintech fair, which we do, and other government organizations also look at talent. So that's another thing to think about. So we've gone through the phases of building a fintech, and now I just want to give you some real life tips on how to build a fintech startup in Saudi Arabia, based on what we have seen as Fintech Saudi coming from the ecosystem. So the first thing we would say is focus on local pain points that you can solve and scale. We see a lot of activity or a lot of opportunities that have replicated things they've seen in the US or Europe or Asia and say, hey, we want to bring that to Saudi. And sometimes that will work. Sometimes it needs to be aligned to the local culture, but sometimes it will work. But what you won't necessarily get is the international scalability of that solution. What we would love to see more of are solutions to local pain points which are being solved, and then those solutions scaling up. So to give you an example, there's a fintech company called Mozen, which is working in Saudi, and they focus on AML and KYC, but there's a specific niche around helping companies to track Arabic spelling names, because Arabic names can be spelled differently in Arabic or English. So their solution is super important in solving a local pain point, but it's also applicable for anybody who's got customers in Saudi Arabia, in Saudi or internationally. So that's a really good example of a fintech which has solved a local pain point, and now they're looking to take that Arabic first language processing system they developed and scale into other markets for doing something similar. The second thing we would say is don't build a business that an organization can switch on as a feature. This is really important in not just in Saudi, but in any market. We are seeing the big tech companies coming in and looking at new solutions or looking at building new features where fintechs before had considered that their whole business. So most recently, Apple has switched on buy now, pay later, when there was a whole bunch of fintech companies which are doing buy now, pay later themselves. Now, that doesn't mean to say those companies won't be successful or be able to pivot or be able to develop their solutions, but it does mean that it's more difficult for a company in the buy now, pay later space to gain that market share if there's a large group like Apple, which is involved in that area. So we would also recommend not building a business that an organization can switch on as a feature. Think about a niche. Think about specific niche that large companies cannot look at. It could be a specific target customer group. It could be a specific product or solution which is in a super interesting niche that the big technology companies would not be interested in. And that's really where we would say is a good starting point for you to build something that cannot be replicated by a large business. The third thing we'd say, and this goes back to having niches, is to have a specific target audience in mind. As we discussed, it's important to think about who is your first target audience and how are you going to get to them. The best examples are a niche target audience, an underserved target audience, and a group which is accessible. If you can tick those three boxes, then there's a really good target audience there to think about, and then maybe think about their pain points or the pain points related to them and looking at how you can build the solutions based on the back of that. The fourth thing we'd say is make a positive difference. Now, this is more from a personal perspective, but if you're going to spend this time and dedication to building a fintech solution, then use it to make a positive difference. Use it to improve people's lives. Use it to how can it actually add a lot of value to people. I think that's a really important thing, which keeps me passionate and may keep you passionate as well about your solution, is if you, at the back of this, are making a positive difference to somebody, then you're more likely and motivated to make sure that you are scaling things in the right way. And the final thing, and this is where we talked about earlier, is beware of the regulations and look at how you can start despite the regulations. This is super important, and we're actually going to talk about an example for this, because we get a lot of fintech entrepreneurs who come to us and say, well, we can't do anything because the regulations are there, we don't meet the regulations, we're not getting a license, we have to wait until things change, or and so forth. And really they don't. It's more about how you can, yes, be aware of the regulations being there, but think about how you can start your solution. The faster you start, as we said, 95% of want-to-be entrepreneurs don't execute. And that's what the differentiating factor is. If you can execute, you are already ahead of the game in doing that. And let's look at an example of what we mean for this last point in particular. So as an example, say, for example, my business, I've been through the pain points, my business, a validation, what I want to do is I want to build an investment brokering business to trade stocks in 3 clicks. That's what my solution I want to develop today. Now, when I go out and look at the regulations for this are very clear. Capital Markets Authority has an investment brokering license, which I would need to get. And the minimum capital balance for that is 50 million riyals. So if I was to take the mindset of fintech, which says I need the regulations to start before I can start, then what I may do is I might try and speak to the regulators first to see if there's any flexibility or any way which the regulations can change. I probably will find out that there isn't. And then my next step will be to, well, I need to go out and try and raise 50 million riyals because I need to meet the minimum capital balance in order to get the license. And that's super tough in a normal market. If I don't even have a product, that's even worse. That's even more tough to get 50 million riyals. But that would be my next step. I'd be looking at how can I raise the money to then go out and get the license. Now, assuming I could raise that money, I would look at starting to build the solution and apply for the license process. I would go to the Capital Markets Authority and start looking at the license. Remember, by this point, I still haven't gone into the marketplace, and this could take 12, 18 months for you to get to this sort of stage as it is. Then, and then the next stage would be, well, I will then, if assuming that I've raised the money, assuming that I made the application, assuming that I've got my license from the Capital Markets Authority, I've met all the terms and requirements, I will then start operating and build and my first customers. Now, the problem with this model is that it's high risk, it's less investable from an investor's perspective, and it's longer to start operating. This could take 18, 24 months on this process before you start operating. Now, let's take the mindset of somebody who's going to be able to start despite the regulations. So the first thing we should do is, okay, the regulations are there. I need to get an investment brokering license if I want to trade stocks. But how about I build a platform for dummy trading instead? That's not a regulated activity because I'm not trading physical stocks. I'm providing a dummy stocks instead. And on the back of that, I can hold competitions. I can use that for helping companies to recruit staff as well. And on the back of that, I can build a user base, which is using my platform. I've already got a platform out there. I've already got a user base, which is starting. I can then go out to investors and say to investors that I already have an existing platform. I might have 5,000, 10,000 people using that platform. So I have an existing product. And I can go out to investors and say, now I want to go out, I want to raise money for getting my brokering license. And investors are going to this is a much more investable product because you already have an existing operating business, which also means that you can command a higher valuation for when you're going out to raise money. So assuming that I can raise the money, I would then apply for the license with the regulators. Now, the regulators will already be able to see my solution. They will be able to see that I've already got a user base. They'll be able to see what I'm doing in terms of educating people on investing into stocks. And so they will have more confidence that I have the ability to scale my business up. And therefore, it may even be easier to get the license for an existing operating business. And then once I've got the license, I can add investment brokering to my existing platform, knowing I've already got users which are using my platform, which may have been practicing on dummy trading and might now be ready to invest in real money. And I may be able to also attract new users as well. So this mindset is very much low risk, is faster to market, and it's more investable. So this is just giving you the examples of how, despite the regulations, you can still look at how you can pivot your business and start your business quickly. So the final thoughts, just going back to the final thoughts, I'm nearly at the end of before we start taking questions. There has not been a better time to start a fintech business in Saudi Arabia. Fintech is one of the fastest growing industries globally and definitely locally. And as you have seen, there's a lot of exciting areas over the last 8 weeks. You've seen a lot of exciting areas to work in fintech. And it's still a new area. There's still a lot of problems that we need to solve. There's a lot of friction. There's a lot of pain points in the marketplace which need to be solved. There is also a lot of government and regulator support. So of course, Fintech Saudi and the initiatives that we do to support entrepreneurs, and we'll go through some of those in a second. But there's also the testing environments from the regulators. There's also funding support as well. We have a very good, strong foundation of investors now in the kingdom, which are able to support a lot of these solutions at the angel stage, at the VC stage. There's also government grants available. And you are starting from a base where there's low levels of competition. Yes, we have about 90 fintech operating in the kingdom, but that's still very small in comparison to places like the UK or Singapore, where they have thousands, 1,500 fintechs operating. So there is still a lot of opportunities. There's still a lot of gaps to look at developing solutions in the kingdom. The final thing I'd say is, if you want to be an entrepreneur, my advice is just do it. Just go out, experience it, enjoy it, and you will learn so much from the experience of being an entrepreneur. There's a few codes here which you're more than welcome to click on, and we can send you the links to these afterwards anyway. But the Fintech Access Guide is super interesting. It's really useful. There's a whole section on there about the entrepreneurship framework, and it goes to a lot of more detail than we have today. So I definitely recommend reading that, either the English or Arabic version. We, as Fintech Saudi, are also looking at developing the Entrepreneurship Bootcamp. We haven't set the date for the next Entrepreneurship Bootcamp, but if you're interested in attending, then I would definitely click on there and pre-register yourself, and we will let you know when we're doing the next bootcamp. So that's my thoughts if you want to be an entrepreneur. If you don't want to be an entrepreneur, as we said, entrepreneurship is not necessarily for everyone. There are still things you can do. The first thing is support your friends or family that want to be entrepreneurs. Now you know how that entrepreneurship journey can be, how difficult that journey can be. So if you have friends, if you have family which are looking to become entrepreneurs, help them out. Speak to them about their idea, give them some feedback, test their idea for them, connect them with people which could be useful. Any of that support would definitely be welcome from an entrepreneur. The second thing is, you do not need to be an entrepreneur to have an entrepreneurial mindset. You can still work in a company and have an entrepreneurial mindset, and it will probably help you in your career if you're able to spot opportunities, if you're able to look for ways to improve things. So developing that entrepreneurial mindset is still important, even if you decide not to be an entrepreneur. And the final advice I'd give is, even if you don't want to be an entrepreneur, make sure you still find something you're passionate about and follow your passion. That's really important. I think we see a lot of people who may not necessarily follow the passion. They may be working in a 9-to-5 job that they don't necessarily enjoy. And that, to me, is not really a good use of the time. They should look at how they can either do that job and follow their passion, or find a job where you can follow your passion full time. So that's it. So we are now at the end of the Fintech Summer Sessions. Thank you very much for joining us over the last 9 weeks. You have completed the Fintech Summer Sessions, and you probably now have more knowledge about financial services than 99% of the population. As you mentioned, what you choose to do with that knowledge is very much up to you. You can use it as general knowledge. You can look at careers in this area. You can look at entrepreneurship in this area. Whatever you decide, Fintech Saudi is very much there to support you with that. Stay in touch with us. Be connected to us through our newsletter, through the Twitter, and connect us any questions you have on info@Fintech Saudi. One thing we would say is we are relaunching Introduction to Fintech course. You are the first group to hear about this course because we only arranged to finalize the dates a couple of days ago. But this course will be happening. It's a 7-week course. It's run by a group called EMFT and an instructor called Loredana. It's in English, and it covers fintech in a lot of detail over 7 weeks. You have a combination of online learning, which you learn during the week, and on the weekends you have 3-hour workshops with Loredana, where she will actually take you through building a fintech solution as part of a group exercise. There is a cost for this course. It's $850 plus VAT. Fintech Saudi does not make any money at all from this course. All the money goes to the facilitator and to EMFT for running this course. If you are interested in joining, then click on the QR link here and go in and pre-register. We will then send you a access code, a code to a link, sorry, a payment link to then actually make the payment and secure your place as part of this course. You are the first group as part of the Fintech Summer Sessions to get access to this, and it will be on a first come, first serve basis. I think we only allow up to 25 people per class. So we expect this to go really quickly. So I would definitely recommend looking at that. I think that's all I had. I've been talking for a while now, so thank you very much for listening, and thank you for joining us over the last 9 weeks. I'm available on LinkedIn, as I mentioned. I'm also available on Fintech Saudi, so info@fintechsaudi.com if you want to reach any of us, me or any of the team, and we're here to support you. So good luck with anything you decide to do in the future. Yeah, we're very happy to take questions now.
Yeah, thank you, Sagar, and thank you everyone who have joined us today. For the first question, someone is asking, should the goal of the entrepreneur to eventually exit, and either through getting acquired or publicly listed?
Good question. But as I said before, going into entrepreneurship, you should not be thinking about the money side. You should be looking at other reasons. Money would be great, and the main ways that entrepreneurs would get money is, as you said, through an exit or through developing a cash-based business, a cash flow through your business. They're the two main ways in which entrepreneurs can make a financial return. Getting an exit is easier now than it was before. It's still challenging. You need to get to the right level of momentum. You need to find somebody who wants to buy you out. But there is work that I was doing a lot of work around developing stock listing market for technology companies. So I think it's becoming easier and easier to look at exit options. But at the start of your journey, it's very much about how do you get to that stage of building a fintech business. And exit is something which you should be mindful of when you start building that business, because it's important to think about where do you want to be in terms of your lifestyle as well in the next 3-5 years, in terms of commitments, and where do you see yourself going if it does get to that stage. But do the groundwork first before thinking about the exit.
All right, thank you, Sagar. Another question would be, what do you mean by a prototype, or what is a prototype?
Great question. Sorry, I should have explained that in more detail. So if you go to the Fintech Access Guide, in fact, I'll put the link up again so you can check it out. The Fintech Access Guide explains it in a bit more detail. So a prototype is very much your first solution. It's something which works. It's something that a customer can go through, but it's not a finished product. It's nothing. It's not polished. It's not going to be something which is extremely amazing. It's just about being functional. And a prototype is there to make sure your customers are following the journey, but for you to also learn from them and improve on your prototype. The reason why we follow the lean startup methodology, which is about building your prototype, is it costs a lot less money. So if, for example, you spend $10,000 on a prototype and you find out the prototype doesn't work, then that's better than you having spent $100,000 trying to build the best thing ever and then find out it doesn't work. So prototyping is about getting into the market, testing different things, figuring out what works, and then going out into iteration version 2, version 3, version 4, and so forth, and building your product better.
All right. Another question is, at which point of the startup should the entrepreneur quit their day job and become fully dedicated to building the startup?
A great question. And honestly, unfortunately, I can't give you a straight answer to that. It's a personal preference. It's a really difficult decision. I know that a lot of people have, is they've got their day jobs, they're getting a salary, they're paying their bills, and they're trying to develop something on the side. And one person who's a very strong, who's really important and has done a lot of startups, his view is just go in there and just dedicate full time to that job. But that's to the startup. But that's difficult, right? Because if you've got bills to pay, I would personally say if you've got enough savings and you can take a view of, I want to take 12 months out of my business, and I've got enough savings to support me to be able to go and focus on my solution full time. That's the best solution. If that's not possible, then continue to run them in parallel. And when it feels right, then look at how you can look at doing the transfer over from your day job. It's completely down to your personal preferences, your lifestyle, how much money you need to live. So I think it's difficult to give an answer, but it's something that everyone should be mindful of in terms of how can they look at creating maybe a residual income, which allows them to work more on their solution.
All right. Another question would be, is it mandatory to have a background in finance to be a fintech entrepreneur? And have you ever witnessed a non-finance background person being an entrepreneur in the industry? Really
good question. The answer is no, you don't need to have a finance background to become a fintech entrepreneur. It helps. If I look at the most successful sort of fintech entrepreneurs, they have all come from a financial services background. They've worked in financial services, they've understood the challenges which they're facing, and they've developed a solution to solve the challenges which they've been living and breathing. And that's a really good trait. So if you're working in financial services, I think that helps. But if you're not, that doesn't mean to say you can't develop a fintech solution. If you see an interesting niche, learn everything you can about that niche, and you might even want to find a co-founder who's worked in that niche to come on board with you to support you. So I think there's ways around it where you don't necessarily need to be a finance background or a work in financial services to develop a fintech solution, but you do need to have team members which have got that experience and that network to support that business.
All right, just give me a moment. At what point or at what stage can we register the idea at the Saudi Authority for Intellectual Property? If you have any.
To be honest, I don't know the answer to that because I don't think we've dealt a lot with the intellectual property authority. With Fintech Saudi, you can register your idea whenever. So we have a database currently of about 500 to 600 fintech ideas, pre-commercial, at idea stage, at pre-commercial stage where we're still prototyping, at operational stage. And that's something which we then invite those fintech entrepreneurs to specialist events. They get access to coaching sessions, they get access to mentors, they get access to different supports. So with Fintech Saudi, you can register your fintech solution at any point, even when you're just thinking about an idea. And within your application or registration form, we ask you what support you're looking for from Fintech Saudi. So it could be you need support with understanding the regulations. It could be you're looking for a co-founder. Whatever it is, we will then look at how we can connect you and support you in the right way. So definitely recommend that. But unfortunately, I can't give any details on the intellectual property IP authority.
Thank you, Sagar. Another question would be, which area of fintech has the most need of entrepreneurship?
All of them. I think we're in a time where there's a lot of opportunities, even in areas where payments are happening, where you can say that there's a huge number of fintech companies in payments. There's still a lot of work to be done in payments. There's things around your customer experience, your payment experience, how you can look at automating a lot of the payments. How can you look at embedded payments within your current experience? I think there's a lot of opportunities in all areas of financial services, but there's also opportunities in financial services in other sectors. So we're now seeing trends of development on, say, for example, tourism fintech. So fintech solutions which are focused on the tourism industry and supporting things such as travel insurance or helping hotels with processing payments and things like that. So I think we're just seeing a growth in a variety of different areas where it's not just about a financial services solution anymore. It's about how you can create a niche with a specific sector or with a specific customer group. But I would say, I'd go back to the point where, yes, look, there are opportunities everywhere, but what are you passionate about? That's the most important thing. It's got to be an area that you're passionate and excited about, and that literally you're willing to live, breathe, and sleep that idea. To be able to then build the right solution and sort of progress in your entrepreneurship journey.
All right. Someone asking, is there any specific coding language you suggest to learn for students interested in fintech?
It's a more technical question. I know Python is really popular, and I think that's really important. I think there are blockchain sort of languages, blockchain-specific languages, which are now developing as well. To be honest, I'm not a technical, I have a technical expertise, so I wouldn't know the answer to that. But I think there is, if you Google that, you'll be able to find a lot of information about technical languages which are developing in this area. If you're still not sure, drop us an email at info@fintechsaudi.com, and we will ask some of the technical guys either in our team or in some of the fintechs what they would recommend, and then come back to you with some ideas.
All right. The last question would be, can financial technology help engineers developing solutions for the industry or any consultancy-oriented companies?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Is it so? If the question is whether engineers can be involved in fintech activity, absolutely. I think engineers actually make really good co-founders or candidates to work in a fintech business, because they have a very logical mindset or thinking, which is really practical for looking at customers' journeys, customer experiences. So I think engineers make really good engineer with somebody with a background in financial services, I think would make a really good team to build fintech solutions. I'm not sure I understood the bit about the consultancy.
All right, that was the last question we had today, Sagar. Thank you very much for the session today. Yeah. Excellent.
So has Nazar joined us, Maha?
I honestly can't see him.
Okay, no worries. But so the last thing I've got to say is thank you very much again for joining. We will be sending a feedback form to you. It's a very short feedback form, but we would appreciate everyone filling that in. At least that gives us an idea of how useful you found the Fintech Summer Sessions. It's the first time we've done a public series of Fintech Sessions. So we would welcome your feedback on what else you'd like to see for the next series that you'd like to participate in. In terms of certificates, then we do, the team will come back to you with certificates. As we mentioned, if you've joined 7 out of the 9 sessions, then you will be entitled to a fintech certificate, and the team will come back to you on next steps of how to do that. And as I mentioned, we do have this introduction to fintech course we are running with EMFT that we would definitely recommend looking at if that's something of interest to you. Other than that, thank you everyone for joining, and thank you for joining us on this journey over the last 9 weeks. We look forward to seeing you in the upcoming Fintech Tour and other initiatives that Fintech Saudi is looking to place.
Thank you, Sagar.
Thanks everyone, take care, have a good evening.